Hello, I'm Nicholas Henshaw. I'm the Dean here at Chelmsford, and these are some reflections on Mothering Sunday, which I shared on Mothering Sunday just a few days ago here at the Cathedral. Mothering Sunday is one of those conundrums, its origins, quite what it means, and the fact that Sunday has at least 5 different names: Refreshment Sunday, Be Happy Sunday, Mothering Sunday, Mother's Day in the secular sense, and some rather odd ones along the way. Indeed, the first reading in some churches this morning is itself, quite a culprit, in that it seems that some of the origins come from the reading from Galatians 4 that was read right through from the Middle Ages until the 1960s in most churches as the first reading on the fourth Sunday of Lent. There are 2 themes there. One is the reference to Jerusalem as mother of us all. It seems very clear that in the High Middle Ages that led to the fourth Sunday of Lent becoming a special time to consider the theme of mothering, special ceremonies around that, and later on, after the Reformation, practices such as domestic servants visiting their mothers on that day, and in some places people visiting the Mother Church, the Cathedral, on Mothering Sunday. It receives its name Be Happy or Rejoice Sunday, Laetare Sunday, from another line in Galatians 4, Rejoice Jerusalem. And so that's the origins in Galatians 4. That's still read in the Book of Common Prayer if that's being used in a church, but it's part of the medieval readings for this day. But the complexity about Mothering Sunday is a peculiarly English one. Across the rest of the world, and originally initiated in North America in the 20th century, Mother's Day is something that happens on a Sunday in May and is a secular celebration of motherhood, and particularly is alongside Father's Day, which is a different Sunday in the American calendar and that of most developed countries. In England, we did something very peculiar and rather sort of typical, I guess. As Mother's Day became more and more established as a sort of secular day to celebrate mothering, or rather motherhood, particularly focused on human mothers, we didn't go with the rest of the world and use the Sunday in May. We decided to elide it with Mothering Sunday. And so in churches we get this interesting confusion, even sometimes reflected in the readings, about what it is we're celebrating. Are we saying thank you for human mothers, or are we celebrating mothering, the mothering and care that we receive from God? God referred to often in Scripture as the mother, or Jerusalem as the mother in the Galatians 4 passage, or are we talking about human mothers? And that's a real complexity that remains, I think, deeply unresolved in most Mothering Sunday celebrations. They go for one or the other, but rarely successfully for both. Now, I have to admit here a certain bias, at least in my early ministry, in that I was so sold on the purity of Mothering Sunday, or the fourth Sunday of Lent, that I found it very difficult to let in any of the influence of secular Mother's Day. And of course, do remember just how modern this elision of these 2 things is. Very much a 20th century invention, creation. But actually, now I'm a bit more grown up, I think, I've come to recognise that something very important is going on, and something we ought to be proud of, whilst not letting go of the Mothering Sunday title as the fourth Sunday of Lent. And that's something I think very close to the kind of ordinary Christianity that the Church of England is deeply, deeply committed to. This sense that we inhabit the world as God's people. We don't sort of live behind the walls of churches. And so I want to say on Mothering Sunday that it's really important that we embrace the secular. Remember, the word secular is not an anti-religious word, although it's become that in our modern culture. Secular just means the age in which we live, or a past age. It can mean either things of this world. And those are not necessarily against faith or unreligious. Indeed, the world, the secular world, is the arena which God blesses as the place of our discipleship. So there's something very important about recognising that sacred and secular are very modern distinctions and deeply unhelpful. There's a beautiful prayer by Michel Coist where he says, I would like to borrow your eyes, Lord, and rise above this city, above time. Then I would see the world as you see it, and I would see there is no such thing as sacred or secular, but they're both one. This world which we're invited to inhabit as disciples of the love of God, as a sacrament of God's kingdom for the world. And so this elision of Mother's Day and Mothering Sunday, however uncomfortable, and I think it's important to feel uncomfortable about it, is an invitation to recognise that the gifts God has given us, this image of mothering and care at the heart of the Gospels that God himself embodies, is also a way of blessing the secular celebration of motherhood and inviting people to join in both ways. After all, in England, and again this was something I found difficult in my younger days, in England, uniquely in the English-speaking world, we don't use a religious word for our greatest feast, or at least not a Christian or Jewish word. In most languages, the word for Easter is based on Passover, Paschal, all those words about passing from death to life, from slavery to freedom, and Jesus as the new Passover lamb who leads us into his risen life. Across language families, the Paschal word is the one that's normal, except in English, where we use the word Easter, which of course is not a Christian word, not a Jewish word. It's the name of a Germano-British pagan goddess. Is that terrible? Well, it could be, unless, of course, we can remind ourselves profoundly that God leads us out into the world to be a sacrament of his kingdom and servants of his love in the very secular places to which he calls us and where he has gone before.